Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk podcast. And today, we will be warming the bench for the biggest football game of the year. That is right, it is Super Bowl week, and we will obviously start there before we move on to another big week around the NHL world. But before that, let's get into the introductions. As always, I'm Labi, and I'm joined by Jacob. Jacob, how are you doing this week?
Good, Labi. Lots of schoolwork, but other than that, everything is okay.
Yeah, January over. We are into February, and I feel like January is always a tough month for everyone to
Yeah.
get through. So, we're inching closer to that warmer weather.
Yeah, and COVID cases are going down, so that's always a plus. Make sure everyone stays safe.
Yeah, as always, hopefully everyone's staying safe. And like we said, the end of January means we are into February, and of course that means it is Super Bowl week. How excited are you for this
is gonna
Super
be
Bowl?
one of the best Super Bowls of maybe our lifetime. I don't know. Obviously, I can't say that now. I'm only 22. But oh my goodness, Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. I'm so excited. I am so excited for this. Your thoughts on this Super Bowl and how exciting these two legends are going to be?
Yeah, so I think first I want to talk a little bit about the conference championship games and what ended up going on there. Um, More specifically, I mean, congratulations to the Bills. I mean, they had a great season. And I think that what we saw in that game was just the fact that when the Kansas City Chiefs decide to play at their best, no one can beat them. Because the Bills didn't particularly play a bad game. They just ran into the Chiefs at their best. And so I like if you're a Bills fan, I don't think you can take I don't think you can look at that and say, oh, we could have done this, we could have done that. It's just a matter of they were a better team than us. And when the team you're talking about are the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't think you can, you know, you really can't take that too personally. They were a better
No,
team.
and everyone knew going into this game that the Chiefs were probably going to win that, but valiant effort from the Bills. Um, Definitely gonna not be the last time you see the Bills in the AFC Championship in the next few years for sure.
Yeah, hopefully not. But the thing with that AFC, I mean, it doesn't look like the Chiefs are going anywhere
No.
anytime soon because Mahomes is young. The Bills look like they're set up long term. We saw, I mean, the Ravens with Lamar Jackson, you got to assume should be good every year. Um, I'm blanking on all these other
Look
talented
who
teams in the
LA just
AFC.
picked. Well,
The
hold on. But look
Browns.
who LA just picked. I know that's NFC. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, the Browns. You're right, 100% the Browns.
The Browns. Yeah, the Browns had a fantastic season, and it looks like it looks like Stefanski might be the right coach to actually put all that talent towards something. I mean, there are so many really good teams where I feel like it would be crazy not to think that the Bills would be back, but then you also have to think about it. The Bills, in order to get to an AFC Championship game, are going to have to beat the Ravens, the Browns, these types of teams routinely, and I think this AFC is loaded. But yeah, moving to the NFC.
Sorry, I jumped the gun there, but oh my goodness, did LA improve?
Yeah, the Matt Stafford trade is, there is a lot to get into there. I think the only thing I'll say is no disrespect to Jared Goff, because ultimately he made a Super Bowl. Ultimately, he's proven that he can be a good quarterback. But I think a lot of people would agree that the Sean McVay offense is what makes Jared Goff the quarterback that he is. Ultimately, we'll see whether that's right or not, because we'll see how Jared Goff does in Detroit, because now we'll have a direct comparison. But I think McVay running that offense with Matt Stafford at quarterback, and if the Rams defense are going to be as good as they were last year,
oh my goodness,
the sky's the limit.
This team was going to be very, very good. Stafford obviously been on the Lions for 12 years, drafted by them, didn't win a Super Bowl, and now he's got a team. Like, imagine what he did his last 12 years without a team, and now he's got a team. Like, good for Stafford, who said he wanted to be traded anywhere but New England. That's kind of interesting. I don't. What are your thoughts on that? Him saying, "I'll go anywhere but New England."
It's the Matt Patricia effect. So Matt Patricia, who is the coach of the Lions, got fired this year, and then he's returning to New England to be a coach in some capacity. So I think the explanation there is he didn't want to go back to his old coach Matt Patricia, who's now in New England.
Right,
That would be
because
my
look what
main
happened
guess.
with Patricia when he was a coach of the Lions.
Exactly. It was essentially the tipping point of I finally
Yeah.
need to get out of here. And switching on to the NFC Championship game, I kind of wanted to ask your thoughts about this. Uh, and I'm going to start by saying that unlike how I said the Bills really couldn't look at this game and say, oh, we could have done this, we could have done that, the Packers, this game was there for the taking. And so the first thing I do want to do is I just want to criticize the Packers' performance, because before I complain about refs and people are going to call me biased and anti-Brady and all of that, let me preface this by saying that with the way the reffing went, the Packers could have easily and should have easily still won this game. I'm not only blaming the refs when I get to that point. I'm blaming the Packers as well, because their defense, terrible. How you give up that 50-yard Hail Mary at the end of the second half, that's inexcusable from a defense to give up that touchdown going into halftime. And then you pick Tom Brady off 3 times in a row in the second half, and then that doesn't lead to any points.
Yeah.
You pick him off, punt. You pick him off, punt. You pick him off, punt. You can't do that. Like, Tom Brady did not play well at all in that game, and the Bucks found a way to win. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers won that game by defense and by taking advantage of the few offensive opportunities that they had. You have to give credit to Brady in the sense of when the opportunity was there, he made the big play to get the points. But, Brady was bailed out by his defense.
Well, yeah, because the amount of picks that happened were it just didn't look like Rodgers. Like, obviously, I have always preached that Tom Brady is 180. He's 180 in the playoffs. Like, he got through the season on 11-5 record, which is good. We all said they would win about 10, 11 games. But I'm telling you, when he gets to the playoffs, like, it's unbelievable what he can do. And you saw what he could do. And so I think here's the problem is, unlike the Bills, that game was closer. That game was up for grabs. Well, this one, everyone expected Green Bay to win that. And so you put that pressure on that team. And obviously, yes, the reffing, the officiating has always been questionable. Obviously, we say this as fans, we're very critical of the refs, although we probably could not do any better in the action. Although some of them we could. It goes to show the difference between Rodgers and Brady is Rodgers will probably play like that the whole season, including playoffs, but Brady kicks it into an absolutely next level gear when the playoffs come. And I don't think you can stop Brady when when he's on a roll. I do not think Brady is stoppable. I really don't. I'm really sorry, but I think even though I know the Chiefs are one of the best upcoming teams and the best in the AFC, I don't think they can beat Brady in the Super Bowl. And we'll get to my predictions later, but I think Aaron Rodgers was in over his head, had a very, very off game. He just never looked like he was into the game, Like,
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, Aaron Rodgers did not play like the MVP that he was during the season, and he should win the MVP this year, based on his performance. And yeah, you're right. I mean, like I said, outside of the officiating, Green Bay definitely could have done enough to win this game anyways. The one thing I will say about the officiating, though, is, you can be critical of the officiating outside of also being critical of the team. Like I said, Green Bay should have won this game despite the officiating, but let's talk about it, because there were a couple of holding/pass interference calls that probably should have been called against Tampa Bay's defense that weren't, which I don't mind. But what I do mind is the consistency about if you're going to let them play, and if those little grabs and jersey tugs and grabbing the shoulder are going to be non-calls all game, then why do you call the pass interference in the fourth quarter against the Green Bay Packers defense? And before people start yelling at me that I know nothing about football, and they're partially right, I'm definitely not the most knowledgeable about football. I recognize that was a penalty. The guy was tugging his jersey. That's an absolute penalty, automatic penalty. But so were those other calls earlier in the game that the refs let go. And so I'm not looking at this from a rule book perspective. I'm looking at this from a consistency perspective. If they were letting automatic penalties go earlier in the game because they were letting them play, why are you calling it in the fourth quarter? Especially because one of those pass interference calls that were missed by the referees led to Rodgers'
Mm-hmm.
interception. And then you can argue that that would have
Right.
changed the course of the game. So the referees definitely impacted the game. But once again, I just want to make it perfectly clear that despite that, the Packers still had enough and should have done
Well,
enough to win
yeah.
this game. So it's first and
Yeah,
foremost
no,
on the Packers.
100%. At the end of the day, the refs may have screwed up, but you do what you do. In hockey, if you take a bad penalty, whatever they score, you suck it up. All right, they scored, big whoop-de-doo. Just get it back the next. You can't be slumped over your head and complaining for the rest of the game. Oh shit, man, that was a terrible call, bro. What was that? And then do that for 4 quarters? No, you're gonna lose because you're just gonna be complaining the whole time. So what you need to do is, yeah, it was a bad call, and yes, one of those pass interferences at the end, it was like the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter, that gave Brady a first down on like third and something. Um, sure, it was a bad call. Maybe the ref was pressured to do it because it was and it wasn't. It could have gone either way, but that's no excuse to stop giving a crap. Like, you are in the AFC NFC Championship, so bad calls are gonna happen every day, and we are very skeptical. Like, as fans, we're very critical of refs when they make a bad call. Oh, he'll never ref again. Oh, blah blah blah. Sure, we could say that, but they're humans too, man. Like, they make mistakes, and yeah, sometimes mistakes cost a whole season. But again, if there's 5 minutes to go, you're down by a score, and there's a bad call, does that mean your defense is just going to give up? Like, are you just going to stop playing? No, you have to keep playing, and you have to even play harder because sometimes the tide doesn't turn your way. So, shame on Green Bay kind of for giving up and not going that whole game, and they kind of paid for it, and that's just it. It's just how it is.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is it's not like the missed pass interference in the Saints and Rams game a couple of years ago where that missed call did directly impact the result of the game. Because the Rams were able to score like on the next play to change
Mm-hmm.
the course of the game. I don't think the officiating had a direct impact on the final result. Like, did it help Brady get that first down right at the end of the game, which essentially killed off the game? Obviously, yes, it did. But like I think we both have agreed, at that point in the game, the Packers had more than enough opportunities to be up by at least a score, if not multiple scores at that point, to really kill off the game. But, not to talk too much about that, we obviously want to be looking forward. Let's get into the Super Bowl. And I think you were kind of talking about how it sounds like you have faith in Brady. So let's get into the Super Bowl preview. Are you picking the Buccaneers to
Lavi,
win the Super Bowl?
I am picking the Buccaneers. Brady is getting his seventh ring. Um, like, yes, Mahomes is excellent. Don't get me wrong. Mahomes is one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now. But it's Tom Brady. This guy does not screw up. He lost that one season or he lost more than one season, but he lost that one Super Bowl to the Eagles because the defense decided not to show up. Um, but he's the GOAT. He is the greatest of all time. He is making his 10th Super Bowl in his career. 10 Super Bowl. John Elway and Joe Montana combined don't equal the amount of times Brady has made to the Super Bowl. So I don't see how Brady loses because uh, what if he wins the Super Bowl, he'll go 7-3, which is a record I can't even fathom. Like, that is unbelievable what he has done in his career. And like I said, Brady in the playoffs is a completely different Brady. Yes, Mahomes is crazy and he's always moving and he's always doing these crack glass whatever throws, underhand or stuff like that. But I will never doubt Brady, and I think Brady will win his seventh.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to throw out. First of all, Patrick Mahomes, I hope he's gotten on the phone with Eli Manning in the last 2 weeks. Because if anyone knows how to beat Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, sorry, I had to throw a New York Giants reference out there at some point. Always got to find a way. Um, but yeah, it's hard to bet against Brady, and obviously, when you look at his resume in terms of championships, in terms of Super Bowl appearances, in terms of stats, in terms of legacy, in terms of everything, obviously it's unparalleled. But I want to focus on this year, and Obviously he's not the same. I don't think he's the same Tom Brady as he was back in his prime. Obviously, though, he can still be good enough to win this game. But ultimately, I don't think it comes down to the Bucks. I think it comes down to the Chiefs. And here's a thing about Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Since Patrick Mahomes became the starter of the Kansas City Chiefs, when he has played the entire football game in the playoffs, when he has played all 60 minutes of a playoff football game with the Kansas City Chiefs, the Chiefs are undefeated.
Yep.
They have not scored less than 31 points, and they have won every single game by more than 7
Right.
points. That is that is ridiculous. You look at the games that Kansas City haven't. It was the game this season in the playoffs where Chad Henne had to come in late and keep the game because of Mahomes left injured. And then the time they got eliminated in the playoffs in the AFC Championship game a couple of years ago against the Patriots, where Tom Brady was, the Chiefs would have won that game if they had just lined up onside. The offside penalty was the difference in that game.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
you're right there.
and that was, we're talking about a couple of seasons ago where I think that the Chiefs have only gotten better. Mahomes has developed more. Their defense has gotten a lot better. Now here's where I look at it. I'm going to assume that Patrick Mahomes is perfectly healthy, 100%, plays all 60 minutes of this game. So because of that, just based on the way that happens, I'm going to assume the Chiefs score 31 points in this game. Can the Bucks defense limit that? Sure. So you know what? Even to give full credit to the Bucks, like I'm trying to think of the scenario in which the Buccaneers play the best game that they ever could possibly play against the Chiefs. I think that the best game they could ever possibly play against the Chiefs, they'll only hold the Chiefs to like 24, 25 points. That's at least my assumption. And then my question is, can Brady and the Bucks offense score more than 24, 25 points in a game? I think the answer is yes, obviously. But then on one hand, Brady's coming off a 3 interception game. On the other hand, how many times has Tom Brady thrown 3 interceptions in a game, let alone a
Exactly.
playoff game? So I doubt he's going to throw 3 interceptions again. Like, I'll definitely give you that. I just think that the Bucks would have to play a nearly perfect game, and even then they would narrowly win. And so because of that, I have to go with the Chiefs. I'm definitely not saying it's impossible, and I certainly don't want to bet against Tom Brady because I know that just you don't win if you bet against him. But I just think that the odds are so stacked against the Buccaneers where that defense would have to stand on their heads, and Brady would also have to have a good performance. And I haven't seen the Bucks put up a complete game in the playoffs just yet. And so because of that, it's certainly possible, but I have to
So
lean
you're
Kansas
saying
City.
that it's going to come down to like the defense because both offenses are just going to outscore like just ridiculous amount of throws.
Yeah, I think the Kansas City defenses are no slouches. Like, obviously, the offense is going to get all the attention as they deserve, but definitely don't sleep on that defense. But yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I think that the difference in this game is going to be, can the Tampa Bay defense neutralize Mahomes in the offense in the same way that they neutralized Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay? And I don't know. It's possible. Obviously, I didn't think they'd be able to shut down Aaron Rodgers as much as they could, but I mean, Aaron Rodgers is a hell of a quarterback. You can make the argument that Mahomes is better right now. And I think the majority of people would say that Mahomes is better right now. And then if you look at the weapons that he has around, no disrespect to the guys there, but, Aaron Rodgers is throwing to Lazard and, like, I don't even know any of their other guys. Mahomes has so many weapons at his disposal. I mean, if you give Aaron Rodgers Travis Kelce, I don't think he loses last week's
I
game.
think you're for. I also, I yes, I agree. But look at what Tom Brady has to throw. He's got Antonio Brown. He's got Mike Evans. He's got Goodwin. I think it is, or Hadwin. Like Godwin.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
who it is.
Godwin. Absolutely. No, I absolutely agree with you. I think my argument is less on I don't trust Tampa Bay's offense because I do. I think they can score. I just think that no matter how much they score, Kansas City will match them.
I definitely agree. So I think it'll be either one of two things. It'll be like a shootout from the beginning, slinging 50 yarders, or it's going to be like 3 points in the first half for both teams, just feeling each other out. Then the second half will be a complete rampage.
Yeah, and hear me out on this too. I think if the Bucks make this a shootout, they don't have a hope in hell. If this becomes a who scores last wins, I'm taking the Chiefs all day, every day. If this becomes a shootout 40-point game, first of all, I'd love to see that because that would be way better than the last couple
Like
Super Bowls
yeah,
we've
like
had, aka Jared Goff putting up 3 points in the Super Bowl.
yeah.
But I think that honestly, that's the way that the Bucks need to approach this game. And here's the thing: Tom Brady playing in his 10th Super Bowl at home, because I don't think we've mentioned that the Super Bowl is taking place in Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I think that that's ultimately going to hurt them because hear me out, because I know it's Tom Brady. The best chance that the Bucks have of winning this game is if they hand off the ball to it's Ronald Jones is their running back, right? I'm not
I
just
think you're
making that
right.
up.
I'm not 100%, but
Yeah. Once again, I'm aware they have a good running back. I think it's Jones. I'm literally gonna have to double check because I know I want to get things right. But the Bucks have a really good running back. In fact, I believe they have a really good running back tandem in on that team. I know they have a good offensive line. And look, I know all the weapons they have at receiver and everything like that. They need to dominate time of possession. They have Leonard Fournette as a backup. Yeah, Ronald Jones
Fournette.
and Leonard Fournette is their running back duo. They need to run the ball down the throat of Kansas City. They need to possess the ball as much as possible. How do you beat the Chiefs? You don't
If
give Mahomes the ball.
exactly.
My fear is that they're going to let Tom Brady throw 35 times. And that might be great, and he might do a fantastic job. He might throw 35 times, throw for 4 touchdowns and 300 yards. I'm not, but I don't think they can win that way because even if they do that and put up 30 points, then every single time you give Mahomes the ball back. If you're running the ball down Kansas City's throat, wearing out their defense, dominating the time of possession, if you don't let Mahomes see the field, then he can't beat you. And I'm worried that the Bucks aren't going to approach the game like that because they have Tom Brady. The whole reason that they're here is because they went out to get Tom Brady. And so I feel like because of that, they're going to just be giving Tom Brady the ball and say, go lead us to victory. And as much as I recognize that Tom Brady is a very damn good football player, I don't think that that's how they
Well,
win.
I think Mahomes and Brady are similar in the sense if you want to win, you got to keep them off the field. So I think what will happen is it'll either be a very like it'll be a game where it's just nothing but throws from both teams to try and outscore the other. They don't care how long each other's on the field. Or it's gonna be a running game and it's gonna just like melt down the defense and grind down the defense and stuff like that. So I'm with you in the sense that the defense really needs to win. You need to keep the other quarterback off the field. These are two extremely elite quarterbacks. And it's gonna come. I think it's gonna come down to a one play game, and whoever has the ball last. Like if you're Tom Brady, and or if you're not Tom Brady, but if you're a fan and there's 2 minutes to go and it's a one score game, you'd rather have Tom Brady in there. And there's nothing you can do to change my mind because Tom Brady has proven time and time and time and time again that in the last 2 minutes of any given game, he is unbeatable. So I would.
Yeah, the one thing I'll agree with you on that is no matter if it's a one
Mm,
score game, whoever has the ball with 2 minutes left
will
in the
win.
fourth quarter, I agree with you. I think that whether it's Brady or Mahomes, I have faith that that offense will be able to drive down
100%.
the field. I definitely agree with you on that. And actually, the last thing I will say in terms of predictions, I mean, I'm not leaving the Chiefs. I'm taking the Chiefs. But what I will say is for a more specific prediction, I think that if the winning score is under 25 points, I think the Bucks will win. If the winning score is more than 25 points, I think the Chiefs will win. And I think that the Chiefs will score 31 points at least in this game, which is
Fair
why I'm
enough.
going
I'm
Chiefs.
sticking with Brady. I trust him. He's a seven. It's going for 7, and I don't think he's gonna be denied this one. So I'm gonna have the Bucks.
There you go. And we hope you all enjoy the Super Bowl this coming Sunday. And I think we'll probably even maybe delay next week's podcast until the Monday afterwards. That way
Yeah,
we
for
can
sure.
have the ability to talk about the Super Bowl for next week's podcast. But switching over to the world of hockey, and there are a lot of big stories going along there as the season rolls on. And let's just start with probably the thing that's uh, the biggest story, or at least the story that's probably been most likely to you seen outside of the hockey world, and that is the New York Rangers have waived defenseman Tony DeAngelo. He cleared waivers, and we do have to say that as of this moment, we're unsure what's going on in terms of what his future is with the organization. But what we do know is that he was put on waivers. Now, Jacob, do you want to sort of walk through Tony DeAngelo's history and why, a young defenseman seen as having a lot of potential just signed a new $4 million contract would just get, would just put on waivers
So
by his
Tony
team?
D'Angelo has a history of kind of being a jerk, but so does a bunch of guys in the NHL. You're gonna have one every now and then. Um, However, he does, and this actually happened recently. Uh, Miller on the Rangers scored his first goal, and D'Angelo took the puck so that Miller couldn't get it. So that's kind of a dick move right off the bat. Now, the reason he was waived exactly was due to an incident in what after a game in which they lost. So, star goaltender for the Rangers, Alexander Gorgiev, was sitting down, kind of deflated. They just lost the game. It sucks. Losing a game sucks. D'Angelo walks by and says a slur towards the number 40, the goaltender on the team, who then proceeds to clock him in the head. This was not the first time that D'Angelo has said a slur to a different player, but I have a feeling it also would not have been the last. The team had to make a decision. Are we going to keep D'Angelo, or are we going to keep our goaltender? Both are young, and both are very good, and they went with the smarter choice, and they decided we are not going to have this kind of behavior tolerated. We refuse to let anyone like this treat anyone else like this. So they put him on waivers. No team is going to pick him up because no one wants that kind of energy on their team. And that's basically the gist of it. Is he's a jerk player with a jerk attitude, and so what? He's young, and he was good, and when he played well, he was like one of the best defensemen. But no matter what you do, and no matter how good you are of a player, if you don't have the right attitude, it's not going to work. And it didn't work in New York, and it will not work anywhere else. Labi, if you want to say anything else on the topic.
Yeah, well, I think that there's a lot of factors here. First, we'll talk about the on the ice
Mm-hmm.
component a little bit, just because I think you covered the off ice component really well. Last year, he had 63 points, which I believe was fifth in
He had
amongst all
he had
defensemen and
60
defenseman scoring.
60 what, three you said?
Yeah, I
In
believe it
like
was
54
63.
games.
Yeah, he got a lot of votes for Rookie of the Year
Yep.
in the NHL, and I mean, quite frankly, he deserved it.
Yeah.
Um, this year, on the other hand, he got a game misconduct penalty, I believe the first game of the season or the second game of the season, but very early on in the season, and it was just an unneeded penalty. Uh, just, he didn't need to do what he did to get ejected from the game. And so, as a response to that, the Rangers benched him for the next two games in response to his ejection. And then, since then, he just has not played well. Like we said, 63 points last year. He's seen as an offensive defenseman. He has 1 point this year, and he got it in Friday night's game against the Penguins, a game in which he was -4 despite getting an
Yikes.
assist. He was on the ice for almost every single. He was on the ice for 4 out of the Penguins' 5 goals, including the overtime winner, and he's a -6 on the season with
So,
just the one
yeah,
point.
he's not playing
So
well.
from a yeah, he's not playing well, and I think that the Rangers have, they're as we've talked about on this podcast, a very good young team with a lot of young talent, especially on the blue line. And there are a lot of people saying that, honestly, with the way he's playing right now, aside of all the off ice stuff, he's honestly playing his way off of the team, where they might consider dressing another young defenseman ahead of him just to see if they can play any better. Because obviously, if you're a -6 and not scoring, your spot in the lineup is going to start to be at risk. Then you combine all the off-ice stuff that you were talking about, and you did a good job of mentioning everything that's happened in the NHL. He was suspended twice in junior hockey for using slurs and abuse of an official, and he was suspended last year in the NHL for abuse of an official. So this is clearly, a long-standing pattern of behavior, which you have to ask the question of the New York Rangers, if they were aware of this, which they should have been, then, uh, at some point, why were they okay with that track record? And it seems like he's just been a toxic influence in the locker room as well, with all the points that you mentioned in terms of getting into fights with his teammate. And, taking a picture with your first goal puck is like a tradition in the NHL. Sort of everyone's done it. Alexis Lafreniere, who plays on the Rangers, did it a couple of days ago. He scored his
I mean,
first NHL goal, and
it's
they
just a
posted on Instagram the
it's a
picture of him with the
tradition. You
puck.
don't break that tradition. It's like this young kid who's coming into this league that's like an elite league, and they score their first goal. You give them that puck.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that was probably one of the final straws. And then obviously we have this whole locker room incident. And once again, we have to say it's not confirmed, but from the research that we've done, there are like 3 or 4 different reports of the same incident. And so while it's not confirmed, I will say that I'm going to trust it when it's being said by like 4 different reputable sources. It's more likely that that's going to be true. Apparently the story is he got into a confrontation with the goalie, and then it was actually Chris Kreider, a separate player, who punched
Oh,
him in the
okay.
face.
Well, in the end, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Elliot Friedman said he was clocked in the face, so either way, he was clocked in the face.
Yeah. So that is the report, and it was in a response to sort of just generally how he's been in the locker room. And so I think that ultimately, if you look at everything on ice, off ice, it makes sense that he gets put on waivers. And I think the interesting thing is now he's cleared waivers, so every team in the NHL had a chance to claim him for 24 hours. Everyone, unsurprisingly, decided to pass. So now, because he's getting placed on waivers, he moves down to the taxi squad. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. Apparently, there were reports that the Rangers were actively looking to trade him, but they couldn't find anyone willing to take him in on a trade. And so at this point, the Rangers really have a couple of options. They can either play him, which I don't know if they're going to do, just purely from the fact that he's been terrible this season from a on the ice perspective. They can either just have him be a healthy scratch and he'll eat up the $4 million in cap space against the team while sitting in the stands, or they could move him to the minors, which is an option. But then again, obviously, you've got to think that the minors are still an area where you want to grow a positive culture, and I don't know if he would be a good fit there even. And then the fourth option is to just, flat out buy him out of his contract, but obviously that would have significant financial, impact on the Rangers' salary cap. Of course, he's under contract for the next 2 seasons, so it'll be very interesting to see what happens long term.
I think if
with
you're
that.
the Rangers, you keep him on the taxi squad and just not play him. Like, if you lose a defenseman, just play 5 defensemen. You don't, like, I understand you want to win games, but with morale like that in the team after what's happened, you just don't want him back there. Or you take someone else, because they have 2 defense, 2 forward, I think an extra goalie. So take the other defenseman.
Yeah, and the Rangers play the Penguins tonight. D'Angelo out of the lineup. I can't remember the name of the guy who's in to replace him, but they have another pretty decent young defensive prospect who will get the chance to make his NHL debut tonight in his place. And yeah, I agree with you. I think that's probably what will happen. He'll just end up being a healthy scratch for the not-so-distant future. Speaking of giving defensemen a chance, and speaking of the Rangers and the Penguins, of course, playing tonight, let's talk about injuries in the NHL, and particularly the Pittsburgh Penguins, as of course.
Pittsburgh, hospital. It's ridiculous how many guys are out.
Yeah, so the Penguins have used 12 defensemen So far this season. We have 6 defensemen in the lineup for tonight, in addition to 6 defensemen that we have out injured. So, in other words, we could field a lineup of injured defensemen. That's how injured we are. So, we have Chris Letang and Brian Dumoulin, which is our normal first line pairing, both injured. Then we also have Marcus Pedersen, Mike Matheson, Juuso Riikola, and Zach Trotman, all injured. Now, some of them, like Chris Letang, day to day, but others are long term, week to week, a couple of month injuries. And so, it's going to be very interesting. And I talked about in last week's episode the whole point of hitting the panic button. And I really still don't know where to sit with these Penguins because they still aren't playing well. I'm aware of how injured they are on the blue line, so I can't really blame them too much. Our goaltending has been atrocious. We make so many stupid decisions that lead to mistakes. We gave up a shorthanded 2-on-0 goal yesterday, which is just something that should never happen at the professional
that
level.
was pretty brutal.
But the Penguins are 5-1-1 in our last 7 games. So at the end of the day, they're winning, they're picking up points, so I can't really get too mad because for how badly they're playing, if they pick up 2 points at the end of the night, essentially that's the only thing that matters when you look at the standings.
I mean, yes, but you should be concerned about those standings because there's other teams who are scoring a lot and other teams who have, a full roster. So I understand you're 5-1-1, but now you've lost some of your best defensemen and you should be very, very concerned.
No, absolutely. The one thing I will say, though, is it's given the opportunity for Pierre-Olivier Joseph, or P.O. Joseph, as he said he doesn't, he likes to be called. And he's been a revelation in the first 2 games. He's been fantastic. He already has 4 assists, and he's playing like our best defenseman right now. And so, I mean, I'd assume Letang and Dumoulin will be healthy at some point and pick it up. Obviously, like you said, if we start to lose games, obviously that will be a big worry. But, if we can continue to pick up wins and continue to do enough to make the playoffs despite the poor performances and injuries, I mean, I'm now thinking of when this team becomes fully healthy again, Letang and Dumoulin should still be a very solid first-line D pair. Now you have the opportunity of Marino and P.O. Joseph in a second pairing, and then, you still have all of these other guys who you can try to find 2 defensemen who are playing well enough to be there on the third line. Whether that's Ruido, whether that's Ceci, whether that's Pedersen, whether that's... I can literally go on. We picked up Yannick Weber off of waivers the other day, and he drove 16 hours from Nashville to Pittsburgh and then played Friday night. So big shout out to him for playing. I think he got 15 minutes of ice time after driving 16 hours all day. So big shout out to him for doing that because that's, I'm sure, was really taxing on him, not just physically, but also mentally as well.
16 hours driving? Holy crap.
Yeah, but obviously, I'm left honestly feeling optimistic about our chances as long as we can continue to do well and get into the playoffs.
But
obviously, speaking of go ahead.
You're missing the elephant in the room. It's not your defense, it's not your offense. It's who's in net, and you should not be impressed, or any Pittsburgh fan should be impressed by Jari or DeSmith's play this year. It has not been good.
The only team that's worse that's worse goaltending wise are the Ottawa Senators, which we can pivot to in a little bit. But I want to kind of talk about a couple of teams who, so far through 10 games in the season, are kind of borderline along that playoffs. And so I want to give you the team name, and just very quickly, in sort of 30 seconds to a minute, tell me whether you are concerned
or
about their ability to make the playoffs early on. So concerned in terms of I'm starting to worry if they can get into the playoffs, or are you not concerned and you still have faith in the team? And the first team I want to mention are the New York Islanders. So they, through their first 9 games, 3-4-2, they have 8 points. They're currently 3 points out of the last playoff spot. And we talked about how deep this East Division is, but we both said that the Islanders will be good. Are you starting to get worried, or are you still convinced that the Islanders are good enough?
A little concerned, but again, I trust Barry Trotz. He's probably the best coach in the NHL right now, so he'll figure it out eventually.
Okay, and the next two teams come from the North Division. We'll go one at a time. Well, the first team we'll talk about are the Edmonton Oilers, and we'll probably pivot back and talk a little bit about McDavid and Draisaitl specifically because holy shit, can
Holy shit is right.
we're 10 games into the season, and we're ultimately it's a two-man race for the Art Ross Trophy at this point because McDavid and Draisaitl have like 10 more points than the rest of the league just because after their game with Ottawa last night. But it is worth mentioning that through 11 games they're 5-6, they're below 500, and they're hovering right now on the border of that last playoff spot. Are you convinced or are you worried?
Yeah. They got 11 points last night. They also played Ottawa, who scored 5 goals on them. Their goaltending has always been and will always be an issue unless they actually figure it out. When the Leafs played them, they split the 2 games, and it kind of showed that their offense it's not good enough. McDavid, that first line is absolutely ridiculous. There's no changing that. It's the best first line in the league. There's no question there. But other than that, nothing. Like and they only beat the Leafs in overtime because Keefe put out the second line, and I actually don't mind what he did there, but that's for a completely different time. I'm concerned. I really am because you have a North Division that this season has actually been surprisingly like challenging. So if I'm the Oilers, I'm a little bit concerned.
And then the other Canadian team that I want to talk about are the Calgary Flames. Now, also, this does come with a little bit of context because they have 4 games in hand on the Oilers, 4 games in hand on the Canucks, a game in hand on Montreal and Winnipeg, and 3 games in hand on Toronto. So although right now they are in 6th place, 3 points out of the playoffs, some of it does have to do with them being only playing 7 games, but they're 3-3-1 in those 7 games, which is 500 almost on the dot, essentially. And I think that, a lot of people would have expected them to be doing a little bit better than that. Are you convinced or concerned?
I am in between. Because on one hand, on paper, Jacob Markstrom is playing great. Obviously, he's Jacob Markstrom, one of the best goalies in the league. But on the other hand, you got like 2 lines maybe of talent, and then after that it kind of falls off, and I think that's where they really are missing a lot of their scoring is when look at the team like Montreal, the Leafs, you got a whole 4 lines that are putting in work, and when it comes down to a game and when you need to win a game, you need that 4th line to get a goal every now and then, and Calgary is not doing that. It's the same with Edmonton. They're not really doing that. So that's why I'm like on the fence. I would be concerned in the sense that their defense has looked very shaky and they don't have those bottom 2 lines helping them. But did I say convinced or concerned? I think I said it convinced, yeah, or concerned. Okay. Anyway, let me reset that. Concerned because their defense is shaky and the bottom 2 lines are not great. Convinced because those first 2 lines and Markstrom is absolutely nuts, and I think that's I think that's why I stand on that.
Yeah, I think it's also worth mentioning that after a slow start, they had that team-only meeting a couple of days ago and then came out of that team-only meeting and beat Montreal the other day. And so, maybe this is the start of them turning it around.
I have a question for you before we move on.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Of all the teams you've watched in the North, I'm going to ask you just a simple, which team do you think has surprised you the most in the best and the worst way?
Ooh, this one's an interesting one. The team that surprised me in the best way.
I think I will agree with you because I think I know what you're going to say.
You know what? I'm gonna make it a tie. I'm gonna make it a tie because I've been very critical of the Leafs and I do want to give them the respect that they deserve. They've had a very strong start to the season. I was gonna say Montreal. So the team that I've been most impressed with is a tie between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Winnipeg Jets. And the reason I'm not saying Montreal is because I actually expected Montreal to be this good. So I'm not too shocked by it. Although I certainly will give them the credit that they deserve for being this good. Winnipeg. I was not convinced with their defense. I know Hellbuck's a damn good goalie, but I didn't think the depth on the offense would help. I thought their lack of defense would hurt. They're 5-3 to start the season, and for Winnipeg, I mean, I think that the longer they can stay in that playoff fight, the longer they'll convince themselves that they can actually make the playoffs. And obviously, the addition of Pierre-Luc Dubois will only help them, assuming that he actually, gives 100% effort. But that's a whole other story.
Which
And
team
then in
surprised
terms
you the most in like a bad way?
in terms of who has been surprised the most in the bad way, the only reason that this is going to the only way I'm going to answer this question logically is to go through the other teams. So I mentioned Toronto and Winnipeg as being good and being good in a surprising way. Montreal, I expect it to be this good. I mean, I really do think that they're close to a playoff lock in this conference. That leaves us with Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, and Ottawa. Vancouver, I might as well go through the teams quickly because, like I said, it'll make my answers make more sense. Vancouver, they're 6-5. They're just above 500. This is kind of what I expected them to be. I think that they're not an elite team. I think they lost a lot from that team that went really deep into the playoffs last year, but ultimately the core is still there. They'll get really good development. Quinn Hughes has been phenomenal this year. And I think that not a lot of people are really talking about that. Quinn Hughes has been one of the best defensemen in the NHL in the first 10 games of the season this year. He's been that good. So the Canucks are kind of where I'd expect them to be, which is bubble playoff team. And then honestly, same with the Oilers. Look, if you were to tell me that Draisaitl and McDavid would be averaging 2 points per game, but the Oilers would still be below 500, I wouldn't be surprised because we've seen them do this last year and the year before that and the year we know that McDavid and Draisaitl could put up 100 points in a 56-game season, which they're on pace to do, which is ridiculous. First of all, absolutely ridiculous. But it's equally as ridiculous that they might miss the playoffs despite that, and the fact that I don't think a lot of people would be surprised. And so because of that, it's not the Oilers, because if they're around 500, that's about where I'd expect them to be. Calgary, they've only played 7 games. I'm starting to get concerned, but I don't think they've disappointed me the most because I've seen them turn it around the last couple of days. They've looked better. The reason why I'm picking Ottawa as the team that I'm most disappointed in, despite the fact that I picked them to finish last, they are last, they're not doing anything record-wise that's been utterly disappointing. But it's the way in which they're losing games. In 9 games, they have a minus 22 goal differential. Matt Murray looks like he can't save a beach ball. It looks like I could go in net and be better than Matt Murray, which obviously I know isn't the case. But from the eye test perspective, he's just failing it. And honestly, I probably should have seen this coming. Matt Murray is a good goalie. He was a really damn good goalie in Pittsburgh, but the reason why he struggled so much is because he was mentally shattered. Because the fan base, the organization, the city turned their backs on him, and he's left Pittsburgh as a broken man.
Yeah.
And no, that's not his fault. It's the fault of the fans, the organization, the city of Pittsburgh. We did Matt Murray dirty. The unfortunate thing about going from that environment to a team in Ottawa is even if Ottawa treats Murray with love, treats Murray with respect, supports Murray, wants him to grow, wants to develop him mentally, wants him to regain that form, when you're the goalie for the Ottawa Senators and you're going to be going up against 35 shots a game and you don't have a lot of support offensively, you don't have a lot of support defensively, I'm not surprised that he's broken down, because it's really hard for a goalie to recover his mental form when he's literally going to be hung out to dry by a garbage hockey team every single night.
You can work on your physicality every single day, but if you're not mentally there, you're not going to mentally play great.
Exactly. And when you're trying to recover your mental game, you can't do it as the goalie of the Ottawa Senators. You can't, just because of the way the game works. And just also, last night, I didn't realize it. Edmonton was 4 for 5 on the power play.
They scored. They were 4 for 4 going into the second period, and then Ottawa killed one.
Yeah. I'm sorry. How? I'm actually genuinely interested. I'm trying to pull up the stats now as quickly as possible in terms of what their special teams are. The Ottawa Senators' penalty kill percentage is 68.4%.
Not good.
Which is awful. Their power play percentage is 15%. And granted, it's very early on in the season, and so obviously these will stabilize over time. They're also third last in the league in face-offs. They're only winning 44% of their face-offs.
Yikes.
They're giving up 31.6 shots per
Like that's
game.
Freddie. That's like Frederick Anderson numbers. The Leafs have been very notorious for having somewhat questionable defense, and Frederick Anderson is not facing as many shots anymore, which is why I think the Leafs are doing a lot better than other teams.
Yeah, and then this goes back to, like, if you're a goalie who is trying to recover mentally, you need a couple of wins. You need to get wins under your belt. You need to get easy games under your belt. You need those 20 save 5-2
Yeah.
wins. The thing is, the Ottawa Senators are not going to outscore teams because we see they can't score on their power play. They're not deep against all these other teams in the Canadian division. And then when you have a penalty kill that's going to give up a goal 35% of the time, and Matt Murray has to face 32 shots a night, it's a recipe for disaster for him. And I hope that he's not going to get to a point where it's beyond repair. I really hope it doesn't get to that. And so when I say the Ottawa Senators have disappointed me the most in the North Division, it's not because they're 1-7-1 and have 3 points in 9 games, because I was expecting that. It's the way they lost their games. You look at their opening 2 games against the Leafs to start the season. They won the first game, and then the second game, the Leafs were by far the better team, but it wasn't a convincing win on the scoreline. It was a convincing win in the game, but they only won by a couple of goals.
5-3 or something, final score or something.
Exactly, right? And if you're going to lose a game 5-3,
that was Ottawa win. They won 3-2. Stützle got his first.
They won 3-2, then they lost 5-3.
Reverse.
That if you're going to do that over the season but lose more than you win because you're a weak team, that's fine. When you're losing games 8-5, 6-1, 5-0, that's where you really start to really hurts, and it's going to hurt your mental side of your game. It's probably going to hurt the development of your young players. And so it's because of how badly they're losing that I'm ultimately the most disappointed in Ottawa, because I knew they would be last, but I didn't think that the margin would be as wide as people said it was. And it looks like that margin might be even wider than people said it was, which is really disheartening.
Are big Ottawa fans, a couple Ottawa fans, and they say their coaching is questionable. Like DJ Brown is not a good coach. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I can't say I follow the Ottawa Senators too closely, but from what I do know historically, if you have an owner who's problematic, if you have, history of problematic coaching in the past, talking about the Uber video, it doesn't surprise me, because that's something that's really hard to move away from. Like, when you're talking about the culture, the ownership, the coaching staff, yes, you can get a new coach, yes, you can overhaul, but it's really difficult to change the culture of a team overnight. So if Senators fans are saying that they're unconvinced by the coaching, I can definitely buy into that.
Yeah, they say I would relate it to the one time I can't remember what that coach's name was, like Peter something, but it wasn't a good coach, and I do genuinely feel bad for Senators fans, because we knew they'd be bad, but they're hurting their development, and this is going to hurt in the future. I'm totally with you on that one.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, obviously teams go through cycles. Teams are really good for a year, then really bad. Teams have a window for a couple of years, then they lose it. Obviously, not every team is going to have a Crosby, McDavid, Austin Matthews type of player that's going to keep their window of competitiveness open. A lot of the time, like the Columbus Blue Jackets, for example, they had that 1 year with all those guys on expiring contracts. They went for it, and then their window kind of closed a little bit. But the way in which the window is closed on the Ottawa Senators, if you were to watch the Ottawa Senators play a hockey game last night, that 8-5 loss against Edmonton, and you were to tell someone that 3 years ago they were a goal away from making the Stanley Cup, they would have laughed in your face.
100%, because they're like, this team that let in 8 goals, 5 goals in the first period, 4, it was ridiculous.
And it's beyond just the team. If you were to look at the stories of Melnyk and ownership, if you were to look at everything that they've gone through coaching-wise, all of those off-the-ice stories, the having to remove seats in their stadium so it looks like their percentage capacity is higher. Like, if you were to tell these stories to someone, show them last night's game and say this team was a goal away from the finals 3 years ago, you would never believe that. they've fallen, forget fallen like off a cliff, they've fallen off of Mount Everest. Like, it's like I still don't understand how they were a goal away from the Stanley Cup Finals all
Because
those years ago. And I get that all those players are gone, but I'm talking about from a culture perspective.
here's the thing: is because they still have the fans. And I'm not saying, oh, it's 2021, there's no fans. No one has fans except a few teams. No, it's because the fans never gave up on that team. They were behind Anderson. They were behind that core. They were behind them. Yeah, Melnick said some very idiotic things, like when you're about to play your outdoor alumni game and you say Ottawa might look better somewhere else. Yeah, you get pissed off too. But the fans stuck with that team, and that's what they played for. They didn't play for the owner. They didn't play for that guy because that guy's a jerk. Melnick is a jerk. But they played because they had heart and they had nothing to lose. Everyone knew Carlson was gone. Everyone knew half these guys were going to leave. So they just played. They didn't play and try. They just played to have fun. And look what happens when everything clicks and everything works together. Because they could care less what Melnick says. I'm sure it does hurt eventually, but you're like, you know what? He doesn't believe in us, so but the fans do, and that's who we care about. So that's probably why they were able to do so well that's why they were able to do so well back then.
Yeah, and I think ultimately you kind of make the point about the owner, and I think less so hockey, and it's more so in other sports, particularly like a sport like baseball where there's no salary cap and ownership matters
Yeah.
that much more. But to a certain extent, like, I really don't think that the Ottawa Senators or the Arizona Coyotes are going to be able to have long-term success in the NHL unless they get a stable ownership
Yep.
group in. And I really think that that's a big deal. And obviously the Coyotes have their own off-ice problems with Shaka as
He
the
was he
GM.
was just
Like,
suspended for a year in any hockey operations.
yeah. And then you obviously
Miller.
have the whole drafting the worst possible kid to draft with your fourth round pick, and that whole thing, which we've mentioned on the podcast and we don't
Right.
have to get into. But, I think that ultimately people underestimate the importance of that, and how well a stable ownership group can do. And, obviously, using the example of the Penguins, obviously, having Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and all that really, really helps. But, that was a team that was really probably going to
Yeah.
relocate. And a combination of drafting Crosby, but also Lemieux and Burkle coming in and becoming the owners of that team really stabilized that franchise. Where 15 years ago, the Penguins were really on the verge of moving, and now, 15 years later, they're one of the staple franchises
Yeah,
of the
for sure.
NHL. And it's obviously a combination of having elite talent, but it's also a combination of what good ownership can do. And you look at, they were able to get a new stadium in downtown Pittsburgh, stable ownership group. The fan base was always there. But as we've seen, the fan base doesn't always guarantee that you'll keep your team. A lot of it does fall
Ownership.
on the ownership. And so, hopefully, Ottawa, like you said, as a Canadian, you obviously want there to be as many Canadian teams in the NHL as possible. And so you hope Ottawa can
Yeah,
figure
and
it
the
out.
same thing with the Leafs is a lot of questionable decisions were made, and bringing in Shanahan definitely brought back a lot of love to this team. It's a former player. I think he won a few cups. I can't remember if he won a cup. I think he won a cup. Yeah, he did.
Yeah, yeah, with the
Red Wings. Yeah, I
Red
would assume it was the Red
Wings.
Wings. So you bring in a guy who people can trust, and that's the thing is he's not a jerk. You don't ever hear about anything going wrong with him. And I agree. I think the players are affected depending on what management says. Like look now as the Senators are suffering because Melnick doesn't think that they would look bad somewhere else. Like I don't think those comments hurt back then, but I think they're hurting now because they're really thinking about it. They're losing a lot, and they're like, "Oh wow, Melnick said that. Maybe he was right, and maybe we don't want to play." Like stuff like that. So I agree. I wish we had more Canadian. There's been a lot of talk of bringing back the Quebec Nordiques, like that would happen, but losing a Canadian team, and especially in the capital of the country, would definitely suck for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, so there's some North Division talk. There were also two other teams that I wanted to get your opinion on
Sure.
in terms of maybe less so in the sense of concerned versus convinced, but more so in the sense of do you think that where they are right now is sustainable, or do you think we kind of underrated them in a sense? And I want to start with the Central Division, just because obviously the Central Division is the division that's been the most impacted by COVID, with the Dallas Stars and then the Carolina Hurricanes with outbreaks, and that's affected, the ability to play a
Hmm.
lot of games. And so when we look at the standings, you have Florida is 5-0-1, Carolina is 5-1, Dallas is 4-1-1, Tampa is 4-1-1, which is obviously insanely hot starts from all of those teams. In second place in the division, partially because they've played 10 games versus all those other teams who have
Hmm.
played 6. The Columbus Blue Jackets, they're 4-3-3, which isn't bad. The fact that they have 3 overtime loss points, and we've talked about the importance of those extra
Yep.
points here and there with the shootout overtime loss in this season when everything's within your division. But so 4-3-3, they're above 500, but they have a -4 goal differential, and we've seen how hot Florida, Carolina, Dallas, and Tampa have been this season. Um, Columbus, I'm interested to hear what your
Is
take
it
on them is, especially now with Dubois out and
is it
Laine
bad
coming
that
in.
every time Columbus plays, I really want them to lose? And I'm not talking about last year bubble. I could care less about that. I just don't like the Blue Jackets. There's something about them. Maybe it's Tortorella. Maybe it's I don't know. But there's something about them in which I just cannot stand. Um, they're an interesting team though, if you think about it. They have two backups. You could argue. Obviously, Korpisalo is the guy after Bobrovsky left, but they still kind of have two backups. And look what happened to it last year. They lost to a team with a legit goaltender. So for me, Columbus doesn't make the playoffs just because of how incredibly great everyone else is playing. You're right, 100%. You got 4 other teams there that are playing way better than them and who are way better talent. Florida has been a very an underrated, overwatched team. And I think this year they're really starting to thrive. Although watching Florida play is very boring, they still are a good team, and the Florida fan base should understand that they have a very good team. So um, I think Columbus won't make the playoffs, and I think Tortorella will do his normal thing and get mad. But I think he'll have to change it up significantly because they're bringing in Line, who's a very offensive, and you have a very defensive mind team. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of in a similar boat as the Islanders that we talked about earlier, where I feel like for the last couple of seasons, those two Eastern Conference teams, where you look at them on paper and say, how are they a playoff team? But they always seem to find a way to sneak in, were the Islanders because of their
Mm-hmm.
defensive style under Trotz, and the Blue Jackets because of their defensive style under Tortorella. And there are two teams where, you look at their roster and you think, where's the all-star talent? And I'm not saying that they don't have talent. I mean, Matt Barzal is a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic player. Obviously, Dubois no longer there, but, now Line is a fantastic player. You look at Werenski and Jones on the defensive side. Like, there's obviously really good talent there. But you look at this roster and you think, how are they a playoff team? How are they able to have that level of success? And it's because of the style that they play being hard to play against. But obviously, we saw this year they're both in tough divisions, and I think that the Islanders are figuring that out in the East, and it looks like Columbus may be starting to figure that out in the Central. My question is Florida, Carolina, Dallas, and Tampa's hot starts sustainable? I think we look at Tampa, and obviously the answer is yes, because Tampa's Tampa. I think we both agree on that. We don't have to get
Yeah, no
into
kidding.
it. But Dallas, Carolina, and Florida, they're 5-0-1, 5-1-0, and 4-1-1. I'm not saying that they're gonna, fall off, but are they sustainable at playing at that high level where they're gonna be that far ahead of Columbus, or do you think Columbus has a chance to maybe battle with them, ultimately maybe fall short, but battle with them?
Um, I don't think so. I think I think Bobrovsky's got it figured out now. He's not going to have a season like last season. How brutally bad that was. Dallas is riding a Stanley Cup final. They're not missing the playoffs. And Carolina, I've always said, is an underrated team, and no one looks at them and goes, "Oh, it's Carolina. We're in for a treat." It's like, "Oh, Carolina, this will be a good, easy game." Carolina is a very dangerous team with a lot of dangerous, weapons. Unfortunately, my biggest concern now is Peter Mrazek might be out long term, with what appeared to be a broken thumb, sustained in last night's win. So that could be concerning. That could really be concerning for the Carolina Hurricanes. But other than that, I don't think Columbus has a chance. Even if they do figure it out, these teams are ridiculous. Like, these are really good teams, and I don't think you have a chance of making the playoffs with these teams in this division.
Yeah, no, the last thing I'll say on that is I agree. I think Carolina's an elite goalie away from being a Stanley Cup contender. And, even with a healthy Mrazek, I think that they're still in that elite category for sure. The last team that I wanted to get your thoughts on are the Minnesota Wild.
Oh boy.
And once again, you know how I feel about the
Yep.
Minnesota Wild in their just absolute mediocrity.
Yeah.
I picked them to finish fourth in the division just because that's what they do. Um, your thoughts on the Wild, because they've gotten better goaltending
Yep.
this year. Kirill Kaprizov looks
He
like he's as good as he was
he looks like he's
advertised.
gonna get Rookie of the Year.
Do you think the Wild can take a step forward? And by that, I mean not just make the playoffs, but get into the second round with St. Louis, Colorado, and Vegas in their
Okay, so
division.
let's talk about it. The first two games they won, they came back against the Kings. It's the Kings, all right. Kings are supposed to be bad. Then they beat, I can't remember who they beat after, but then they beat the Avalanche last night in overtime in the game in which they were down in the third. So I think the Wild figured this out. I really do think that the Wild will make the playoffs, and they'll make it. I still think they'll make it in third, in fourth, like you said. But I think it'll be a very convincing fourth place. Like, it won't be like, oh, they made it in, oh, blah blah, like every other year. Oh, they just made it in. Nah, they're gonna convince everyone by making it in. I still think either Colorado or Vegas is gonna win that. Obviously, with McKinnon going out for Colorado, that's a big loss. But I don't. He's not expected to be out for very long. And then you have Vegas, which is unbelievably the way they play. And then you have St. Louis, which I think has figured it out too. So I mean, Minnesota is a really good team, like good looking team this year. And I know what you say, oh, they just barely get in because someone else loses. Like, I think they'll make it in because they win. And I think Kaprizov is going to get Rookie of the Year, and I think Cam Talbot and who's the backup? I can't remember who the backup is. It's some Finnish guy. But I think they figured it out, and I think Minnesota finally has got something to go for, and I think the Wild fan base should be excited.
Yeah. Here's where I kind of go against sort
Sure,
of all of
that's fine.
that. No, I agree with you on a couple of key points. The first thing I agree with you on is I agree. I think they'll comfortably be the 4 seed in this conference. I think that, or in this division, sorry. When you look at the Kings, the Sharks, the Ducks, and the Coyotes, they're just so far removed from the other teams in this
Exactly.
division where I think they will be comfortably in the 4th spot. Yes, they beat Colorado last night, but here's a look at their season. So, like you said, the first 2 games were both comeback wins against the Kings. Then they split a series in Anaheim, split with San Jose, split with the Kings, and then split with Colorado. Now, when you're splitting with Colorado, that's obviously a good thing. When you're splitting with the Ducks, the Sharks, and the Kings, that's less so of a good thing. And so, here's the thing where I agree with you, the Wild will be comfortably in the 4 seed, and I agree they're taking a small step forward in terms of more stable goaltending, Kaprizov being a star to develop. I don't think anyone would reasonably say that the Minnesota Wild could beat Colorado, the St. Louis, or Vegas in a best of 7 series.
Well, I didn't
I
say.
really
I'm not
don't.
saying that. I'm just
And
saying they'll make the playoffs comfortably.
no, I know, but the thing with the Wild is, I mean, they always find a way to sneak into the playoffs. I'm not sure if making the playoffs comfortably as a 4 seed is necessarily the step that they want to see. I think the step that they want to see is, winning playoff rounds, and I don't think that they are there yet. And so I think that ultimately, I think this tiny step in the right direction might actually hurt them long term, because I don't see them becoming a contender. And so because of that, I see them almost like saying that they have Kaprizov and better goaltending might convince them into thinking that they're a
Oh,
contender,
okay.
but it might just lead to like 3 more years of first round eliminations where they could be, really trying to blow up the team and build around Kaprizov and some of the other young talent that they have, instead of, just being accepting getting knocked out of the first round every year. Because as I'm sure you would know as a Leafs fan, and I'm sure I would know as a Penguins fan going back between 2010 and 2015, losing in the first round of the playoffs every year is
It
extremely
sucks,
frustrating.
bro, because you have all the tools and you know what you'd have to do and you still lose. It's so annoying.
And then the draft comes around and you're picking
Yeah, like
22nd,
all that for
and
nothing. All that for nothing.
maybe you'll find a good piece 3 years down the road, but you don't need a good piece 3 years down the road because you're trying to take the next step right away. And all those players who are going to help you take the next step all the way, they've been picked in the
Yeah,
top five.
and that's because you thought you were a fringe playoff team that could make it in and get past Colorado or St. Louis or Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this year, I'm not going to be harsh on them this year because they just got a really bad pick of that division in terms of that division is going to come down to those
Yeah.
three teams. And ultimately, I think that St. Louis has enough weaknesses where I ultimately do think it's going to just come down to Colorado and Vegas. And I think that wraps up the West Division. And so, just to wrap up today's episode, are there any other stories that you want to talk about or things that you want to mention?
No, I don't think so. I think everyone should enjoy their Super Bowl because it's going to be one heck of a Super Bowl game.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to end this episode. So yeah, we will see you next week post Super Bowl. We'll see whose prediction was right. But for now, that's me and Jacob saying thank you so much for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, feel free to follow and give us that 5-star review. That's much appreciated. And once again, we thank you for listening, and we will see you next week. Enjoy the Super Bowl.